I never thought I would sit down and record this. Even now, as I think about putting it into words, my throat feels tight and my hands are shaking. But if I don't speak it, it will eat me alive. What happened to me wasn't a nightmare, wasn't a trick of the mind. It was real. It happened in my own room, and it began on a night that was painfully ordinary. It was past midnight, maybe close to 1. I was lying in bed, scrolling on my phone. The house was quiet, silent in that heavy way where even the ticking of a clock feels too loud. Outside, no cars, no dogs barking, not even the faint hum of neighbors, just stillness. The only sound came from my wall clock. Tick, tick, tick. I remember the rhythm because it almost felt like a warning. I yawned, put my phone down, and let my head sink into the pillow. My eyes were half shut when it came. A sound. At first, faint. A low creak, the sound of a hinge slowly straining. My eyes flicked to the door. It was closed, perfectly closed. I told myself it was nothing. Houses breathe, wood settles, but then the sound came again. Creak. This time longer, more deliberate. I sat up in bed, the blanket clutched to my chest. The room felt colder suddenly, the kind of chill that spreads into your bones. I stared at the door, and that's when I saw it. A thin gap. The door wasn't tightly shut anymore. It was open just a fraction, as if someone had pressed against it. My chest grew tight. My mouth was dry. Step by step, I slid off the bed. My bare feet touched the icy floor, and I felt every nerve in my body screaming at me to stop. But I didn't. I moved closer to the door, every second stretching forever. I reached out my hand. My fingers brushed the wood. Bang! The door slammed shut with such force the walls shuddered. I stumbled back, heart hammering, my breath stuck in my throat. That wasn't wind. That wasn't chance. Something had slammed it. I ran to my phone on the bed, pressed the button. Black screen. Dead. Even though I had charged it fully. My chest tightened further, panic clawing at me. That's when the air changed. The temperature dropped in an instant. I could see my breath fog in front of me. The hairs on my arms rose. The silence was no longer empty. It was watching. And then I saw it. At first, just a darker patch in the corner. But as my eyes adjusted, the darkness had shape. Tall, too tall. It stood right beside my bed, its head nearly grazing the ceiling. I froze. My lungs refused to pull in air. It had. The day after the first encounter passed in a haze. I remember sitting at my desk, staring at my coffee, unable to drink it. Every creak of the house made my heart jump. I kept telling myself it had been a dream, sleep paralysis maybe, but the memory was too sharp, too real. Still, daylight gave me courage. Sunlight spilling into the windows, voices of neighbors outside, cars passing in the street. It made the terror of last night seem distant. But when the sun began to dip, dread sank into me again. I didn't want to go back into that room. Every fiber of my being screamed against it. But where else could I go? It was my home, my bed, my life. That night, I prepared differently. I left the lights on. I plugged my phone into the charger twice to be sure. I even whispered a prayer, though I hadn't prayed in years. By midnight, the house was still. The tick of the clock seemed louder, sharper, cutting through the silence like a blade. I lay down, trying to focus on the hum of the light bulb, the comfort of brightness. But then I noticed something strange. The bulb wasn't humming anymore. I sat up. The room seemed dimmer, the shadows stretching longer across the walls. I blinked. The light flickered. And then it went out. The bulb didn't pop or break. It simply died, swallowed by a darkness far too heavy for a simple blackout. I grabbed my phone, pressing the button frantically. Dead again. No screen, no light. The silence deepened, heavier than the first night. I couldn't hear the clock anymore, not a single sound. I whispered to myself, "This isn't real, this isn't real." Then came the knock. Soft, deliberate. Knock, knock, knock. It came from inside the wall, right behind my bed. I leapt away, pressing against the opposite wall, trembling. My eyes darted around, desperate for light, for escape. The knocking grew louder, faster, until it sounded like dozens of fists pounding, clawing, trying to break through. I covered my ears, screaming, but the sound rattled through my bones. And then, silence. I dared to lower my hands. That's when the whispers started again. Not around me this time, from under the bed. I dropped to my knees, peering into the darkness beneath the frame. Two eyes glowed back. They weren't human, too long. The following days blurred together. Sleep became impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt the breath on my neck again, heard the whispers crawling into my ears. My body ached from exhaustion, but my mind never rested. I stopped going to work. I barely ate. I couldn't explain to anyone what was happening. I knew how it would sound. Insane. But I wasn't insane. Not when the mirror still bore those words. Not when my phone refused to turn on in my bedroom, yet worked fine in the kitchen. Not when the bruises appeared on my arms like fingers had gripped me in the night. By the third night, something inside me had broken. I wasn't just scared anymore. I was angry. Angry that this thing had taken my peace, my life. So I made a mistake. I shouted into the darkness, "If you want me, then show yourself." The silence that followed was suffocating. And then the room answered. The walls shivered, the air thickened, and from the corner of my eye, I saw movement, a shape, tall, crooked, wrong. It leaned out of the shadow like the darkness itself had grown a body. Its face, or what I thought was a face, was featureless at first. But as it drew closer, eyes appeared. Black pits, endless and wet. It didn't walk, it slid, as if pulled forward by invisible strings. I stumbled back, my legs hitting the bed frame. My heart thundered. The voice came from everywhere at once, vibrating the walls, the floor, my own chest. "You called me." My mouth opened, but no words came. "You gave me a name." And I remembered the night before when I had screamed some strange word in desperation. I hadn't even known what I'd said, but it had meant something to it. Now it had me. The presence surged forward, slamming into me without touching me at all. My body convulsed, my head snapping back. I fell onto the bed, every muscle locking tight. I tried to scream, but my jaw clenched shut on its own. My eyes rolled back. Inside my head, I wasn't alone anymore. It whispered directly into my mind, bypassing my ears entirely. Let me in deeper. I thrashed, fighting, but my body betrayed me. My arms moved without my command. My hands clawed at the sheets, at my own skin. A sick heat spread through my chest. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. The shards of glass still lay across the floor, catching the faint moonlight that leaked through the curtains. I had tried sweeping them into a pile, but every time I looked down, they seemed to scatter again, crawling across the floorboards like insects. And no matter how many times I looked away, one shard always found its way back into my sight. That one shard, the largest, leaning against the wall. The reflection in it hadn't moved. It just stood there, smiling, patient. I told myself not to look, not to give it attention, but it didn't matter. I could feel it watching me. By dawn, my eyes burned from exhaustion. My head throbbed with the weight of whispers I couldn't quite hear. That's when I decided to end it. I grabbed every shard of glass, wrapped them in a blanket, stuffed them into a duffel bag, and drove. I didn't know where I was going, just away. Hours passed, empty highways. The bag in the back seat rattled faintly with each bump, as though something inside shifted on its own. By evening, I found myself at a lake deep in the woods. No one around, no houses, just water, still and dark, waiting. I dragged the bag to the shore. My arm shook as I heaved it in. It splashed once, twice, then sank into silence. I stood there, chest heaving, waiting for something, a sign, a scream, anything. Nothing came. For the first time in weeks, I breathed freely. I thought, maybe, it was done. But when I got home,